My sister and niece are coming to live with us. Henry, my husband, surprised me by suggesting that I, a stranger in this situation, should find a cheap apartment to move into. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I was hearing. The house we live in actually belongs to my in-laws, but it's under my name. Although I'm okay with transferring ownership to Henry, I find it hard to accept that I'm still paying the $3,600 mortgage on it. After thinking about it for a while, I smiled and told Henry that I could move out. But then I would want a divorce. Henry smirked back at me and said, "Well, Dad's gone, and you're of no use to me anymore." He seemed almost casual about it. "Since you brought it up, don't expect any share of the property," he added condescendingly. Feeling hurt, I lowered my face and covered my mouth. "Okay," I replied, trembling as I heard the shakiness in my voice. Henry burst into laughter. "Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband," he taunted. I held back my tears, or rather my laughter. Henry had no idea what was coming for him. To distract myself, I thought about where I would live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. A $2 million luxury condo came to mind. Let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm Lisa, 34 years old, and my husband, Henry, is 36. He works as a staff member at a private girls' high school. He's quite popular among the students, often receiving multiple gifts on his birthday. Whenever this happens, he acts like he's annoyed, as if to say, "Give me a break." Once I jokingly mentioned to him not to make that face in front of the girls who give him those gifts. He just clicked his tongue in response. "But why do they give them to me, even though I wear a wedding ring?" he asked. "It's nice to receive gifts from them," I reminisced, recalling my own high school days when I had a crush on a teacher who was 10 years older than me. Henry often warns about workplace scandals spreading viciously. Thankfully, despite the attention from young students, I never worried about him crossing the line. His earnestness probably comes from his father, who was also a teacher. We currently live with Henry's parents in their house. Our plan was to move out once we had kids, but unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. I also work part-time, but we don't have much savings beyond what Henry brings in. Living with my in-laws is comfortable, and they're very kind to me. My main concern right now is my father-in-law's declining health. He's struggling to walk and can't enjoy his walks like he used to, so we bought a wheelchair to help him get out more. I switched to a morning shift at a bakery to spend afternoons with my in-laws. I don't have my own parents anymore, so I treasure my in-laws like they're my own. My parents left me some inheritance, but I still wish they were here. Henry has an older sister named Kelly, several years older than him. Kelly's husband works for a major company, and they have a 17-year-old daughter named Rachel. Henry and I got married a decade ago. Back then, Kelly, who was already working, often left Rachel with our parents. I've always been close to Rachel. She adores me like a real sister. Even though Rachel doesn't need to stay with us anymore, we still keep in touch regularly. On the other hand, Kelly and I never really got along. The first time I met her parents, Kelly's first comment to me was, "I thought he would choose someone cuter," and she laughed. Henry didn't defend me, and if his parents hadn't been upset with Kelly at that moment, I probably wouldn't have married Henry. I don't judge people solely by their looks. What's inside matters to me for marriage. Henry later said he valued what was inside, trying to make amends, but it didn't resonate with me. I felt his parents cared for me more, immediately getting upset on my behalf. That's when I decided I wanted to repay my in-laws for their kindness, since I couldn't do so for my own parents. Lately, Kelly often comes back home and talks with Henry and his parents, but she doesn't speak to me directly about it. Apparently, Kelly and her husband are constantly arguing, despite both working. She gets criticized for not doing enough housework. "Well, if I had a part-time job like Lisa, I could handle the housework too. But I work full-time," she snidely remarked, glancing at me. Kelly often compares herself to me, probably because her parents defended me when we first met, and Henry ended up defending me later. Lisa only manages because her mom helps her. If she were alone, she wouldn't cope at all. Henry chimed in, laughing. When our eyes met and my mother-in-law looked coldly at me, Henry quickly changed the subject. But Lisa is really trying hard, you know. She's been taking care of Dad since his legs got bad, ignoring Kelly's surprised look. I went to the bedroom, worried, and called Rachel. She said calmly, "Oh, that's just Mom being unreasonable." She could do household chores while Rachel was at school, but for some reason, she didn't. From what Rachel said, it didn't seem like she was being unfairly scolded. Henry generally sides with Kelly. Kelly is competitive with me, and it seems like Henry is competitive with his brother-in-law, who works at a prestigious company. But in my opinion, Henry is clearly losing. His brother-in-law contributes much more financially to his family. It's not about earning less. It's about how much of their salary they spend on their family. I don't know the exact details of Henry's income, and he doesn't seem to know or care about how much money I have or earn from my part-time job. I just wish he would contribute enough to live comfortably within his means. I don't even know what he does with the rest of his salary. Sometimes he comes home late, saying he's out with colleagues. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Henry, who dislikes being the subject of students' rumors, wouldn't cheat. At least, that's what I believed. Henry contributes $2,000 to the household. Normally, this would barely be enough to live on. This alone could be a reason for constant fights or even divorce. It's my family's house, so we don't need rent, right? But really, $2,000 is a bit. I suggested asking his parents to contribute to the living expenses. "It's not about that," he replied, seeming to not understand what I was trying to say. I wasn't asking him to support all three of us alone, but his words and attitude showed a lack of responsibility towards the family. "You can say such things after you have kids, like Kelly," he added, knowing it would hurt me. That's when I realized that my husband could care for his sister, but not his wife. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's legs were getting worse, and our house, surrounded by slopes, wasn't suitable for wheelchair use. "Why don't we move?" I proposed to my in-laws when Henry wasn't around. "We can use the money from selling this house, and I'll pay the remaining loan." My in-laws exchanged glances, but said, "You shouldn't have to bear such costs. You're already contributing more to the living expenses than Henry, aren't you?" My mother-in-law said apologetically. "It's okay," I assured her. "I have an inheritance from my parents. Using it for you would make them happy. By then, I may have lost almost all my love for Henry." Despite my growing concerns, I still liked my in-laws and wanted to continue living with them. We spoke to Henry, and we all agreed to move to a new house that we remodeled for accessibility. We installed handrails to make it easier for my father-in-law to get around. The new house is much more comfortable for him. In the old house, even going to the bathroom was difficult, but now he can move around safely. Initially, my in-laws were hesitant, but they agreed when I made one condition: to keep the new house in my name without telling Henry. They also didn't want Henry to know about my inheritance. "If Henry learns about your money, he'll rely on you even more." "We can't allow that," my father-in-law said, trying to protect me from Henry relying on my parents' inheritance. His concern touched me deeply. "I wish I was healthier and not such a burden," my father-in-law apologized. "It's not a burden at all. I look forward to our daily walks," I reassured him, which brought a warm smile to his face. My father-in-law had lost his appetite and weight since he couldn't walk much. I hoped the new environment would help him regain his health. I truly wished for it from the bottom of my heart. During the visit, Kelly exclaimed, "Wow, what a beautiful house," as she walked around without restraint. She tapped on the handrails and commented, "But these handrails are in the way. They ruin the look." "I think my father-in-law's safety is more important than how it looks," I replied. She didn't like my response and just snorted, saying nothing more. "We always keep the toilet seat up to make it easier for my father-in-law." Despite explaining this to Kelly, she keeps closing it. No matter how many times I explained, she wouldn't stop. Once I heard a loud crash from the bathroom. My father-in-law had fallen while trying to open the seat. "I've told you not to close it," I said sternly to Kelly while helping him up. I couldn't forgive her this time, even as she was my sister-in-law. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt. But leaving the toilet lid open is unhygienic, isn't it? And it's not good for Dad, Kelly argued. That's not the point, Kelly. Do you want to hurt Dad? I responded firmly. This time, it was my usually calm mother-in-law who became angry. Mom, Kelly didn't mean any harm, Henry interjected. Exactly. It's an exaggeration to say I would hurt Dad, Kelly laughed. But my mother-in-law's anger didn't subside. Get out right now, she demanded, driving Kelly away. For a while, we could live in peace, but my relief was short-lived. Soon after, we discovered that my father-in-law had cancer. It had already spread throughout his body by the time it was found, and there was nothing we could do. He passed away just 6 months later. After the funeral, I overheard a shocking conversation from the living room. Now that Dad's gone, this house will be yours, right? Henry speculated. I wonder. Maybe it's left to Mom when mother-in-law's face tensed up. But it's good he didn't suffer long. Caring for him would have been hard, right? Henry added callously. Well, yeah, but we have a handy housekeeper here, he continued, which shocked me. I quickly grabbed my mother-in-law's wrist as she moved to open the living room door, shaking my head to signal her not to show her anger. Maybe Rachel and I should move in too, Kelly said cheerfully. Inside, I'm sure I looked as angry as I felt. I had another reason to be angry at Henry. While preparing for the funeral, I found receipts from questionable establishments while organizing his suits. There were several of them in his bag, with addresses far away. He probably thought they wouldn't be traced back to his school or the students. The thought of him using the money he didn't bring home on such things infuriated me. By then, I was already planning how to confront Henry and possibly kick him out of the house. A few days after the funeral ended, Henry suddenly announced, My sister and niece are moving in. You, a stranger, can go live in some cheap apartment. I recounted, stunned and unable to comprehend what he was saying. Apparently, Kelly and her husband had been fighting, and she decided to move back to her parents' house. Thinking her husband would apologize and ask them to come back, I added with frustration, I never thought they would try to kick me out. Henry's unawareness of the house being in my name and my responsibility for the $3,600 mortgage on it brought new realizations. While I had been considering ways to remove Henry from the house, I saw another option. I smiled and proposed, I'll move out, but then I want a divorce. It was clear to me that leaving necessitated a divorce to protect myself in the end. However, Henry, oblivious to my thoughts, just grinned back. Now that Dad's gone, you're of no use to me, he said dismissively. Since you brought it up, there won't be any division of property, he added condescendingly. His tone made me lower my face and cover my mouth. Okay, I replied, trembling, hearing my own shaky voice. Henry laughed loudly, taunting, Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband. Clenching my fists, I struggled to hold back my laughter, knowing he had no idea what was coming for him. To distract myself from the ridiculousness of the situation, I thought about where to live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. I envisioned the $2 million luxury condo left to me by my parents. Among several properties my parents left me, this condo stood out. Although I wasn't very interested in it before, living in the last home my parents stayed in didn't seem like a bad idea. However, I worried about something. Moving there would mean living with my mother-in-law and Rachel. I've been racking my brain to find a way to rescue them from living with those two after my divorce from Henry. When I leave after divorcing Henry, I'll go to a facility. My mother-in-law announced to Henry and Kelly. Hearing about my decision to leave, Kelly reacted, Why? Kelly's coming back to live here. Her words left me puzzled, considering she previously expressed that it was good her father passed away. However, at that moment, a plan came to my mind. Whispering to my mother-in-law to ensure the others didn't hear, I conveyed my idea. If they won't let me leave, getting kicked out is the next best thing. As a result, I ended up staying in the house for a while, with divorce as a condition, sharing a room with my mother-in-law until I found a new place to move. We executed our plan when Kelly and Rachel moved in. During dinner, my mother-in-law said, "Hey, there's no dinner for Dad," causing the other three to freeze in shock. "What? What are you talking about?" "Dad passed away," Henry exclaimed, shocked. Kelly got angry, and Rachel looked worriedly at my mother-in-law. It was challenging to keep Rachel in the dark about our intentions. It was necessary to not raise suspicion. "How can you say such things?" "Apologize to Dad. It's bad luck to talk like that, right, Dad?" My mother-in-law spoke to the empty chair where my father-in-law used to sit. I prepared a meal for him too, maintaining the charade. She continued to behave as if my father-in-law was still there. "If you close the toilet lid, Dad will be troubled," my mother-in-law said, aimed at punishing Kelly and Henry for their previous behavior toward my late father-in-law. I also wanted to see if they would take responsibility for taking care of my mother-in-law. Kelly roughly grabbed her hand and took her to his portrait. "Where's Dad?" "He's gone." "Look, there's the altar," Kelly replied, unfazed. My mother-in-law sat down opposite the altar. "He's right here," she said, her gaze toward the altar. "Beyond all your horrible words and actions, Dad is watching. Always," my mother-in-law said in a calm, cold voice. Kelly looked horrified and cried, "Stop it," before leaving the room. As expected, Kelly was the first to crack. "Mom's gone, silly, but the doctor says there's nothing wrong with her, right?" Henry whispered. "Yes, she acts completely normal in public and in front of the neighbors. It's driving me crazy," Kelly replied. "But we still have the mortgage to pay, and without Mom's pension," they whispered in the living room, unaware that I was listening while doing the dishes. "Finding a facility won't be easy, and it's expensive," Kelly said. "Can you afford it?" Henry asked. "Of course not." "I have to pay Rachel's college tuition until she graduates," Kelly replied. It seemed they were more concerned about the mortgage and money than about my mother-in-law. I turned off the tap and interrupted their conversation. "I found a new home. I can take Mom with me until we find a good facility," I announced. They looked at each other in surprise. "And about the mortgage?" "I've been the one paying it," I continued. "What? Really?" Henry mumbled to himself. "The part-time income minus living expenses. That's the amount that can be paid," I said, pretending not to hear. I smiled at Henry. "If Mom and I leave, I'll transfer the ownership and mortgage payments to you, okay?" "Okay," he simply replied. I felt relieved that I could protect my mother-in-law. But then a new problem, or rather, a convenient situation, arose. Rachel returned home from high school and approached me with a serious look for a consultation. She suspected Kelly might be having an affair. Apparently, one of Rachel's friends saw Kelly walking arm in arm with a man in a suit at night, someone different from her husband. The friend who knew Rachel's dad confided in Rachel that it was definitely not her father. On further inquiry, I learned these sightings happened while Rachel was at school. Kelly's neglect of household responsibilities wasn't because she was a mother or working. It was due to her affairs during the hours Rachel was away. I assured Rachel to leave this matter to me and made her promise not to tell anyone. Then I quickly hired a private investigator to look into Kelly's infidelity. Maybe Kelly felt relaxed since she was separated from her husband, or perhaps she was contemplating divorce as well. Kelly's guard slipped too soon. They were still legally married. The evidence gathered by the investigator confirmed her affair, leading her husband to initiate divorce proceedings. Rachel was to live with her father, and Kelly faced demands for child support. Relieved, my mother-in-law and I left the family home and moved into the $2 million condo. One peaceful evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked, Henry and Kelly were there. "What do you want?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You're not answering your phone," Henry retorted angrily. "I'll be right out," I told my worried mother-in-law, not intending to let them into the house or even past the automatic doors. I thought I'd let them off the hook if they had stayed quiet. Sighing, I went out to the entrance hall. "Let's not talk here," I suggested and drove us to a nearby cafe. In the car, Henry kept asking, "How can you afford to live in such a fancy condo?" It was left to me by my parents. I had been renting it out until now, I replied. Why didn't you tell me something so important? Henry demanded. I felt a twitch in my temple. Why should I? I'd always contributed my share for living expenses, and this property doesn't fall under property division after all. At the cafe, their real concern turned out to be the mortgage of the family home. Why is it so high? $3,600 a month. Henry fumed in a raised voice, barely containing his desire to yell. I sipped my coffee slowly and then smiled. That's the value of living in such a house, isn't it? Don't joke around. Henry slammed the table, drawing attention. Kelly intervened, trying to calm him down. But Lisa, you should have mentioned such a high mortgage. Their desperation almost made me laugh, seeing no sign of gratitude for all the months I had been paying that amount. You never asked, and you pretty much left the whole name change process to me, didn't you? I hinted at their unfairness. But then again, it was understandable. Kelly was facing demands for child support from Rachel's father, and she had also quit her job after the affair became known at work. As far as I was concerned, it was all self-inflicted. I turned to Kelly and said with a smile, "Tough situation, huh?" What do you mean? Kelly looked at Henry, feeling her gaze. He mumbled, "Well, it's not like that." "Oh, right. We've only been out of the house for a few days." I realized she hadn't caught on yet. Henry warned me in a low voice, "Don't say unnecessary things." What do you mean? Kelly's eyes turned to me, demanding an explanation. I shrugged and pulled out several papers from my bag. He only puts in $2,000 and spends the rest at places like these, I said, laying out dubious receipts on the table. What is this? You've been going to these kinds of places. Kelly expressed her disgust and outrage, reading the names of the establishments aloud. You're an idiot. That's disgusting. Kelly's outburst, after tossing away the receipts, seemed to hit a nerve with Henry. What are you talking about? You're the one who's disgraceful, having an affair with a colleague. Their ugly spat unfolded right before me, making me want to tell them they were both equally to blame. As they argued, I quietly observed, sipping my coffee. Judging that a complaint from the cafe might be imminent, I spoke to Henry. "Oh, right. Sorry about that," I said, prompting him to stop arguing with Kelly. There was a sense of alertness in his tone, recognizing that he should be cautious. "What?" he asked, sounding probing. "I forgot to mention there's a popular recreation center near this cafe," I replied. Huh? They both looked at me puzzled, not grasping my point yet. "Many students hang out here after school," I whispered to Henry, leaning in. "See familiar uniforms everywhere. I wonder how many of them are here." Suddenly, Henry stood up with a loud noise, noticing the gazes of the girls around us. I could hear their giggling. My choice of this cafe had finally sunk in for him. "Just so you know, I didn't raise my voice," I said calmly, standing. Henry looked down, trembling. His hand on the table was clenched so tightly it turned white. "Thanks for embarrassing yourself. School tomorrow should be interesting," I added, grinning at him. He collapsed to the floor in defeat. Eventually, the family home was put up for sale, and Henry and Kelly moved to an old small apartment. Kelly struggled to find a new job, and Henry resigned from the girls' school. Apparently, there were complaints from parents about inappropriate staff members. Even if the phone call hadn't come, Henry would have likely resigned, but the call spread the rumors even further. The reason I knew about this was that one of Rachel's friends attended the school where Henry worked and shared the news. As Henry feared, the story spread wildly. Hearing this from Rachel, my mother-in-law shook her head in disgust, and I couldn't help but laugh. Once Henry and Kelly came begging for help, relying on my inheritance and my mother-in-law's pension. They apologized profusely, but I quickly sent them away, saying there was no need for apologies. Now I continue to live with my mother-in-law, and Rachel often visits our condo. She loves the view from the windows as much as I do. We spend our days looking out at the vast sky my parents once admired. With the curtains wide open, we enjoy our meals feeling on top of the world. I cherish this life, hoping to show the filial piety to my mother-in-law that I couldn't show to my parents.